to the organizers of this conference, IQXL. Thank you very much for this important invitation. Like you have stated, I would also like to thank your premier partner, ERA Environmental Management Solutions. We cannot thank them enough. Then, of course, your supporting partners, U.S. Green Building Council, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, Thinking Herd Sustainability Tribe, and also Seeds for Sustainability. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all the beautiful and handsome participants that we have here this morning. Very shortly, I'm going to share my slides with you as an important component of my keynote address. Let me just make this point that we cannot be discussing the issue of sustainability without interrogating the concept of risk. And today we are going to focus as part of this keynote address on the issue of, or the subject of risk-informed decision-making process. Thank you very much. So I'm now going to share my slides with you. Well, that's my slide. Let's quickly go to the outline of the presentation. I'm going to take this opportunity to try to distinguish between risk-based and risk-informed decision-making. And then we take you there to look at the risk-informed decision-making process. And then, of course, how reading here means risk-informed decision-making, how it intersects with the concept of corporate sustainability. And then how does that also tie in with the development, risk-informed development and its core aims? We're trying to navigate through that. Then we try to finalize by looking at the benefits of risk-informed decision-making, and especially as it's had to do with the corporate sustainability agenda. And then I will try to give you my concluding remarks. We'll quickly try to go through this very quickly. This is 30 minutes. And therefore, we're going to have several speakers. Very important speakers have been put together. And so they are going to be speaking in more details on some of the issues I'm going to be touching this morning. Now, let me begin by saying that risk is uncertainty that matters. Risk is uncertainty that matters. If an event or uncertainty, if it doesn't matter, it is not a risk. And what do we mean by being mattering? What is matter? It means to the extent that it affects the objectives of a project, the objectives of an organization, the objectives of a country. So any uncertainty that does not matter is not a risk. And we also need to recognize that risk and decision-making, they go hand in hand. You are right in saying that they are traveling machines. All decisions that we make, even in the area of sustainability, require alternatives or options. Decisions where there are no alternatives cannot be described as decisions at all. That's my position. Decisions are required in the face of options and uncertainties, or in the face of incomplete information and where the outcome really matters. Now, let me be very, very clear. What is risk-based decision-making? We're starting from a risk-based position in order for us to be able to understand and characterize what we mean by risk-informed decision-making process. A risk-based decision-making process provides a defensible basis for making decisions and helps to identify the greatest risks and prioritize efforts to minimize or eliminate them. Well, in the field of risk management, this is very, very straightforward. When we look at the risk management process and whatever the framework that we have in mind, whether it is the COSO framework, the ISO 31000, or the Australian framework, you find that most risk-based decisions follow that standard risk management process. But one thing is quite missing, and what is missing here is that quite often risk-based decision-making are conducted by technical experts without public consultation or stakeholder involvement or engagement. But I need to also qualify this by saying that in any risk management framework, there is some effort or attempt to try to see how to interrogate and, of course, collaborate and engage with all of the stakeholders as we try to manage risk in our respective organizations. This is what it looks like. This is a typical risk-based framework where you have to define the objectives of the organization, the risk objectives, the project objectives, and then you walk yourself through the whole process up to monitoring, and in form of a loop effect, you get back again to the objective. This is pretty straightforward. So the point here is that in this kind of framework, risk-based framework, you find that the technical experts try as much as possible to embed risk into the decision-making process, but it doesn't really work out in practice. It doesn't really work out in practice. Now, so how do we differentiate that from a risk-informed decision-making architecture, as it were? The risk-informed decision-making is a deliberative and a deliberate process that uses a set of performance measures together with other considerations to inform decision. Deliberative and deliberate process. It's quite different from trying to create risk awareness and risk culture within our organizations. The focus of risk-informed decision-making is that it is embedded right from the very beginning into the decision-making process. Now, the decision-making that considers risk as well as benefits, costs, and possibly opportunities is what we refer to as a rhythm. That is the risk-informed decision-making, and it focuses on alternatives. The focus is on alternatives. Now, the reading process acknowledges that human judgment has a relevant role in decisions. So here we are talking about the soft issues and not just only about the hard issues. Under the risk-based atmosphere, you find that the focus is really on technicalities and without focusing so much on the soft issues of risk management. But of course, in trying to tackle complex decision-making problems involving multiple competing objectives, the cumulative knowledge, underline the word cumulative, the cumulative knowledge provided by experience, personnel is essential in order to be able to integrate the technical and non-technical elements to produce what is referred to as the dependable decisions. So we have seen a lot of movement and navigation from the risk-based approach to the risk-informed decision-making process in the past couple of decades. And this is the rhythm tries to combine so much of the elements that we discussed, that we talked about. Those elements include social preferences, political concerns, and of course, budgetary constraints. All of these are tied in to the whole essence of the risk-informed decision-making process. Now, this change that we are referring to, this change, in the relationship between risk assessment and decision-making has been driven by two main factors. One is better awareness that real decisions must integrate multiple concerns, and that outputs from risk assessment procedures often comprise significant uncertainty and thus cannot be used mechanically to derive a well-funded decision. And secondly, ongoing debate on the role of technical knowledge and expertise in decision-making, in which the technical rationality of experts is seen by some critics as disregarding the social context and citizens' concerns, what is often referred to in the literature as cultural rationality in the analysis. What are we saying here? That the risk-informed decision-making process takes it away from the technical focus of the risk experts and tries to interrogate and going into the element of social preferences, political concerns, and budgetary constraints. Now, the rhythm is applicable for decisions that typically have one or more of the following characteristics. One, high financial stakes, complexity, presence of uncertainty, multiple objectives, and diversity of stakeholders. And I'm sure you will agree with me that in the arena, in the realm of sustainability, drive, you find that these elements come into play, from end to end. They play a major role. Now, throughout this reading process, we must admit that the interactions take place between the actors, as it were, the stakeholders, the experts, the technical authorities, and then, of course, the decision maker. In other words, before the decision maker eventually takes decisions, there's so much of interplay of these various stakeholders, okay? And the risk analysts, the subject matter experts, and the technical authorities in order to reach a decision. So the decision maker does not rely only on the technicalities of the so-called technical experts. No, it tries to productively engage with all of the actors within the spectrum of a decision-making process. And those actors include the stakeholders, the risk analysts, the subject matter experts, the technical authorities, and then the decision, before the decision maker comes in. Now, this graphics tries to explain what the reading process is all about. You will find here, and this is very significant, you find here that you have the stakeholders on the left here, the stakeholders with their clear objectives, the risk analysts, the subject matter experts, the technical authorities, all of them integrating and deliberating in order to provide the kind of contending alternatives for the decision maker in order to be able to make the right decision. And this also is the same. You are going to have this slide. So the previous slide and this one, they are all saying the same thing, trying to tell you the kind of integration that takes place among the various stakeholders. So why most companies, can we mute ourselves, please? Why most companies realize the need for reading, risk-informed decision-making process? The underlying risk management process has no reconnection to the firm's strategic framework or methods of performance measurement. What are we saying here? We are saying that the risk-based approach, the risk-based decision-making process is very, very mechanical. It is compliance-driven. It is bottom-up evaluation exercise, which often merely results in lists containing hundreds of risks. We have been through all of these things. So within the sustainability agenda, we need to move away from the risk-based approach and then navigate into the risk-informed decision-making process, where you have to make sure that your risk management architecture is tied to your strategy and also the performance management framework of our respective organizations. This is the point we're trying to make. That it is very important within the risk-informed decision-making process to try and link the strategy of the organization with the risk of the organization, and then, of course, with the performance management system in place. This is what we mean by the risk-informed decision-making process, where strategy, risk management, and performance management are tied together. Please, also, we can add the issue of governance and compliance. They are very, very key, governance and compliance. That gives you the GRC. So instead of just the risk here, we can just replace risk with GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. So when you have an integrative model, linking your GRC with your strategy and with your performance management system, you find that you have what is now referred to as the risk-informed decision-making process. Now, this is the typical roadmap. The typical roadmap of a linkage, evolutions within the organizations in terms of the risk-informed decision-making process. At the very beginning, typical starting point, you have the silos. You have the strategy, you have your GRC or risk management and performance, all of them hanging at one corner of the organization. There is no link. Then, of course, the second stage is what I call the achieved end state. You have your strategy is being linked to your performance management system. But when you get to the actual target end state, you find that the three elements are integrated and they are properly linked together to produce the kind of desired results that we are talking about. So reading and corporate sustainability. Reading and corporate sustainability. We have said that a risk-informed decision-making architecture or framework is one that integrates strategy, a risk, and then of course the performance management system of the organization. Now, in all of this, even in terms of the risk, you find that you cannot separate the issue of sustainability, the issue of environment, ecological framework, and all of that. All of those things, you cannot separate them from the concept and the agenda of sustainability. So businesses need to fully, underline the word fully, they need to fully integrate. They need to fully integrate sustainability, and rhythm into their strategy, not only to minimize potential losses, but also to exploit the new business opportunities arising from the sustainability agenda. Now, this may include new products, new business models, support, and the creation of sustainable communities. Of course, we do know that corporate sustainability encompasses 3 dimensions of needs, known as the triple bottom line. What are these? Triple bottom line? They are economic prosperity and opportunity, social equity and quality of life, and then, of course, ecological resource preservation. Corporate sustainability is an organizational commitment to achieving competitive advantage through the strategic adoption and development of ecological and socially supportive production processes, products and services, and innovative human resource management practices. Well, it looks quite complex, but it's very simple. It's a simple agenda. It means that in your risk-informed decision-making process, which we had described earlier on, we need to find a way. We need to find a way to integrate and build sustainability agenda into the whole processes of the organization. That is when an organization can remain competitive. That is when an organization can remain sustainable. Now, what is this? Let's try to explain more this issue of corporate sustainability and how to integrate it into the processes of the organization. Well, it is defined as a business approach. It is a business approach that creates long-term shareholder value by embracing opportunities and managing risks derived from economic, environmental, and social developments. It's a business approach. It's a business approach. It means it is part of business. No business can be sustainable unless such a business has built in the issue of sustainability into its framework, right? So that approach creates longer-term shareholder value. So if we need shareholder value that is sustainable, then we cannot isolate, the issue, the concept and the issue of corporate, sustainability. No, certain risks are inevitable in order to create value through operations, and some risks are indeed, precious opportunities if effectively exploited and managed. But without embedding, corporate sustainability into the whole process, then we are simply wasting our time. And I want to advocate very, very strongly that organizations must take the issues of corporate sustainability very, very seriously and more seriously. Rhythm, and that's what Rhythm seeks to do. It provides a context. It provides a contextual framework for businesses that are serious about taking on the challenges and opportunities of sustainable development. Now, breakthrough thinking is necessary to incorporate sustainability into every aspect of Rhythm. What do we mean here? What do we mean by breakthrough thinking? What do we mean here? What we're saying is that it's a bit very difficult in many organizations, even to engage in what we refer to as the risk-based, approach, to decision making. Now, when you now go into the realm of risk-informed decision making, it becomes even a little bit more difficult for many organizations. So, the breakthrough thinking is that we need to take ourselves away from the old prism, the old paradigm, and try to leverage on this, Rhythm, the risk-informed decision-making, process, in order to be able to deploy, productively the whole idea of the corporate sustainability agenda. As sustainability develops in the business world, companies can move from short-term risk-based decisions and regulation compliance and longer-term to longer-term reading development of brand, competitive, and operational, advantage. So the point here is that we need to navigate. We need to take our organizations away from the risk-based approach to business, business deployment, and then focus more on longer-term, risk-informed decision-making development. So the point is this: the risk-based, approach to decision-making is a short-term solution to our problems, whereas the risk-informed decision-making process is longer-term, and sustainability is about the longer term. We want to make sure that our companies remain sustainable on the longer term. That is why we need to focus more on the risk-informed decision-making process in order to ensure that our organizations are sustainable. And this has to be proactive and not reactive. And proactive sustainability initiatives are an opportunity for companies to differentiate themselves as leaders in the industry, the environment, and society, ensuring longer-term business success. Reading can protect, can create, can enhance business value through measurement and management of sustainability threats and opportunities, and also help businesses to effectively respond to the growing expectations of corporate stakeholders. Therefore, we need to look for ways of integrating sustainability considerations into our existing corporate systems, processes, and practices within the reading framework. And this is the most effective way to embed sustainability into corporate business rather than creating new systems and processes. So the point we are making here is very simple. Start with the concept and start with the deployment of the risk-informed decision making process in our business. So let's move away from the risk-based approach. Once we have been able to do that, then the next stage is, how do we seek to integrate your risk management architecture with your strategy and then your performance management system? That's the way you migrate. Once you have done that, then of course you try to integrate sustainability into the process and practices of the organization. It's not a difficult thing. It's not rocket science, and many forward-looking organizations are already way ahead, adopting this risk-informed decision-making, and of course integrating, sustainability into their corporate DNA. This is simple to do, and I want to advocate very strongly that businesses need to do this. Now, the World Economic Forum and the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, have identified a good number of threats posing the most strategically significant risk to development as a result of the probability or likelihood and of the national significance of their disruptive consequences. The threats deemed to pose the most risk include, please take very, very, very serious note of this risk. One is the global economic and financial instability, transnational organized crime and terrorism, severe environmental change, including climate and oceanic change and natural hazards, cyber fragility and technological disruption, geopolitical volatility and growing antibiotic resistance, and of course, the pandemics that we have been going through. Now, all of these threats, as they are put together and cumulatively, they present very complex risks and opportunities, and each can multiply the risk posed by the other. And we can also add that they can also multiply the opportunities that are posed by the other. So these threats and complex risk interactions and these interactions have the potential to undermine development gains and the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals unless development is made risk-informed and acts upon that particular knowledge. What we are dealing with here is that beyond integrating sustainability into the corporate DNA, we also need to make sure that the totality of this ties into the development of agenda of various countries. In other words, corporations, the totality of corporations make up a country, as it were. So we need to push the agenda, sustainability agenda, in all of the organizations and companies within our respective countries. That way, that feeds into the overall picture of the of development within each country. So it means therefore that to be sustainable and to be able to push that particular agenda, we need to adopt the risk-informed decision-making process within our respective companies, and then that we push on to the overall agenda, the development agenda of our various countries. Now, what are those aims? What are those aims of the development? That knowledge, the risk-informed decision-making process, that knowledge, what are those development objectives that they will achieve? And there are three of them. One is that it will avoid creating complex risks through poor development choices. That's one of the objectives that such a framework can achieve. And then, of course, the second aim of the second development aim is that it will reduce complex risks by using development to reduce vulnerability and exposure and increase resilience. And finally, it will promote iterative and constant learning to improve sustainable development and resilience. These are very, very, very laudable development objectives. And these development objectives can only be achieved if we integrate our risk-informed decision-making process with the sustainability agenda of various countries to be able to achieve this development aims. So you see how important, one, the risk-informed decision-making process is, and then of course, incorporating the sustainability agenda into that particular framework to deliver this development agenda. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, at this point, let us quickly try to highlight some of the benefits of a risk-informed decision-making. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. The first objective is that of this risk-informed decision-making is that it aims at achieving project and company success by risk-informing the selection of decision alternatives. Risk-informing the selection of decision alternatives. In other words, every decision that we take in our respective organizations, we make sure that risk-informed decision-making process is embedded into that particular decision process to be able to achieve better results. Second benefit is that it will ensure that decisions between competing alternatives are taken with an awareness of the risks associated with each, thus helping to avoid late design changes, which can be relevant sources of risk, cost overshoot, schedule delays, and cancellation. The third benefit is that it will help us to tackle some of the following issues. One, the possible incongruence between stakeholder expectations and the resources required to address the risks to achieve those expectations. Then, of course, it will also help to tackle the issue of possible misunderstanding of the risk that a decision maker is accepting when making commitments to stakeholders. And finally, it will also help us to tackle the issue of miscommunication in considering the respective risks associated with competing alternatives. And also, it tries to foster development of a robust technical basis for decision making. These are all other benefits, and this material is going to be made available to every one of us, and therefore we can continue the discussion, from now till whatever. So these are very good benefits. So I want to strongly, as part of the keynote address, to advocate very strongly that as we pursue and navigate the curve in terms of sustainability, driving sustainability, we need to make sure that we use the risk-informed decision-making process as against the risk-based approach, which is too technical and does not deliver the kind of result that we want to see within the framework of the sustainability agenda. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude this keynote address with these passing thoughts of mine. The first is that developing a sustainable competitive advantage in an increasingly complex and uncertain environment is arguably the most challenging issue facing businesses today. I must add that these challenges are not insurmountable. They are surmountable. And two, If these challenge, if they are to, if businesses are to outmaneuver competitors, organizations need to establish the structural capabilities that can quickly assess how a changing operating environment affects the organization's risk appetite and desired performance level. Sorry about that. And then of course, the third thought of mine is that while there are clearly a number of steps that organizations need to take in order to achieve a state of reading here means risk-informed decision-making, executives, and we are saying you, the executives, should take heart from the fact that for the majority of organizations, the building blocks are already there. And if you have not started laying the building blocks, this is the time to start. And finally, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that taking a risk-informed development approach allows for sustainable development to truly become a vehicle to reduce risk, avoid creating risk, and build resilience. I want to thank you very much for listening to this keynote address. And I also want to thank the organizers and all the support, those companies that have supported this conference, that this is going to be a wonderful and rewarding, conference. And I thank you for your kind attention. Thank you for listening once again. Thank you.